we'll start with this per tweet from Ernie Green. Breaking. Niagara Falls Makia Kreps to fight May 13th at Seneca Niagara Casino in Niagara Falls. Fight televised on Telemundo. According to her management team, fight opponent that has yet to be announced. It will be her first fight under the tutelage of trainer Manny Robles. A very strong corner, Manny Robles. He's the guy that guided Andy Ruiz to that fateful Anthony Joshua showdown, that first fight.
Andy sacked him after the second.
He has since paired up with Eddie Reynoso, and let's see how that works out for him. I always felt that Manny Robles wasn't the problem in that situation ahead of that second fight that led to Andy Ruiz losing the belts.
Losing the belts, he had just won the fight before.
Andy Ruiz may have sacked Manny Robles, but I always felt Manny wasn't the problem. Andy was the problem. That's a story for another day. Manny is now training the very promising, unbeaten up-and-comer from Niagara Falls, Makia Kreps, who wasn't all that busy last year. She fought once, only once, having debuted in 2020.
Late 2020, she fought only once in 2020.
And fought only once last year. Usually prospects, unbeaten up-and-comers like Makia Kreps, they usually have busier schedules than this. Makia sat out most of 2021, only returning to action in November late last year. Hopefully this year proves to be a more productive year for her, campaigning at or around bantamweight. That's 118 pounds, a division that's getting a lot of attention these days.
The last fight was fought just above bantamweight last November.
It's super bantamweight. That's 122 pounds. Yet another division that is fast heating up, another division that yields a lot of opportunities for an unbeaten up-and-comer, a talented one like Makia Kreps.
I don't know if the next fight is going to be a bantamweight contest or a super bantamweight contest.
That has yet to be determined, along with who she's going to be fighting, an opponent that has yet to be announced. Given that this is only her third professional contest, her third professional fight, I don't think it's going to be someone...
You don't want to go biting off more than you could chew after only 2 pro fights.
Are opportunities to capitalize on for Makia anywhere between 118 to 122 pounds. And with Manny Robles in her corner, it's encouraging. She strikes me as a fighter whose career needs a little bit more structure, because the span of time between her pro debut and what ended up being her second pro fight, you're talking about a year's time between fights. Not exactly a very productive schedule for an unbeaten up-and-comer that needs experience and needs to make their bones. Hopefully this year proves to be a more productive year for Niagara Falls' Makia Kreps.
I've seen her in action. She's definitely someone to watch out for.
She's talented, and there really are a lot of opportunities for a fighter anywhere at or around these weights. There are titles to be won.
You've got a major promoter in Matchroom pouring money into these 2 weight classes, these 2 divisions.
Because Matchroom Promotions has ponies in both of those shows, the 118-pound show and the 122-pound show.
Makia needs to get herself noticed.
There's really only one way to do that, getting out there and showing her shit. Look for the return of Niagara Falls' Makia Kreps in May. In other news, what's turning out to be a very big story per a tweet from Mike Coppinger via his infamous sources, George Kambosos is slated to make the first defense of his undisputed lightweight championship on June 5th at the Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, Australia. June 5th is a Sunday, which allows for primetime U.S. telecast on June 4th. Fight expected against Lomachenko or Devin Haney.
You're in the 13th hour, people.
I told you from the very beginning, from the moment that George pried those belts away from the hands of Teofimo Lopez and his short-lived reign as this division's unified champion, it's going to come down to Devin Haney or Lomachenko, either one of the two, and that's the way that cookie's crumbled.
Not Gervonta Davis and not Ryan Garcia.
Chris Mannix stated the framework for a Lomachenko deal is largely in place per sources. Lomachenko is willing to go to Australia on a 2-fight agreement. No significant money issues. Question is, can Eddie Hearn or Golden Boy make a better offer for Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia?
Well, Ryan's supposed to be fighting Emmanuel to go in his next fight, so I think he's out.
That, coupled with the fact that he has left the Eddie Reynoso gym and he's paired up with Joe Goossen, now is a less than opportune time for him to travel abroad to fight for 3 of the 4 alphabet titles.
I was never convinced that Ryan Garcia would be George's next fight.
I figured it's going to come down to Lomachenko or Devin Haney. I'd been noticing the back and forth between Devin Haney and George Kambosos the last couple of days. George's promoter, Lou DiBella, had declared that they had moved on from the Devin Haney fight. DiBella had said he initially made an offer to Eddie Hearn,
and that Eddie had issued a counter-offer that DiBella described as being insulting.
Devin Haney accused George of ducking him, to which George replied, "Everyone supposedly ducks. feather-fisted Devin.
I gotta tell you, if he ends up fighting Vasil Lomachenko instead of Devin, that's not a duck.
Not in my book, it ain't, because in my book, the more winnable fight is the Devin Haney fight. The Lomachenko fight.
Yeah, I don't think George wins that fight.
George, who stated, everyone supposedly ducks feather-fisted Devin, to which Devin Haney replied, everyone that doesn't loses.
But you tell me, if George ends up fighting Loma instead of Devin, do you guys classify that as a duck? Do you guys view the Lomachenko fight as the path of least resistance?
Would you call that a duck? Devin Haney does. Devin Haney, who said, everyone that doesn't loses, to which George Kambosos Jr. replied, because the best are fighting the best. Kambosos, Lopez, Loma, why not accept Lou's offer then? Then we gotta fight. Or you rather counter-offer, lowball, then lie, and make it out like we don't want to splatter your face across the ring. Come back to me when you're serious, mate.
A bona fide case of he said, she said is what this has been so far.
I don't know what to make of it. Lou DiBella claims he made Devin Haney an offer. An offer that was countered by Eddie Hearn, but an offer that Lou DiBella described as insulting. And to that, Rick Merrigan, who handles the career of Jose Ramirez, he chimed in on this entire situation, and he said, never seen an insulting offer from Eddie Hearn for any fight. It may happen someday, but he always sits at the table with a number to talk and get a deal done, or won't even engage. Now, a promoter wall may affect that on the other side occasionally, but nothing insulting.
And he would know. He's speaking from experience.
Don't you remember when Jose Ramirez crossed over to the Matchroom DAZN side of things for that unification match with Mighty Mo Hooker?
He's essentially vouching for Eddie Hearn.
Where Lou DiBella says that Eddie's counteroffer was insulting, Rick Merrigan says that Eddie Hearn doesn't send out insulting offers. To that, Ishe Smith, former world champion Ishe Smith, says, it takes two to tango. I've worked with Lou. Never had the chance to work with Hearn, but if I have to pick who was right or who was wrong regarding George and Devin, I'm siding with Lou. Hearn has yet to deliver a major fight for Devin and is stuck paying him 7 figures.
I'm just wondering, if Lou DiBella sent Devin Haney an offer, who financed it?
Hey, I got nothing against Lou DiBella, but Lou DiBella ain't got a network deal with a major platform the same way that an Eddie Hearn does, or a Bob Arum, or a Al Heyman. Lou DiBella ain't got a major network affiliate, a major network deal with anybody, so if he's saying that he sent Devin Haney an offer, who financed the offer? Whose money is he offering up?
I've been wondering about that this whole time.
Throughout this bona fide case of he said, she said, Chris Mannix stated, Lomachenko's message to Top Rank has been clear. Get me the Kambosos fight. Whatever financial sacrifices Lomachenko has to make for a shot at becoming a 4-belt champion, he's willing to make. And that position, I've maintained throughout, that Devin Haney and Eddie Hearn have a very limited window of opportunity to make this fight, and
I've been saying that since George Kambosos won those belts, that if they're going to do a deal, they need to hurry up.
because it won't take long for Vasil Lomachenko and the top-ranked people to get involved. And here we are. In truth, I don't know what the hang-up is when it comes to Devin and George reaching a deal, but negotiations are reaching the 13th hour. Vasil Lomachenko has already agreed to do whatever he has to do to fight for those belts in Australia. George has yet to accept the terms. It's up to Eddie Hearn now to further incentivize an offer so that Devin can be the one that fights for those 3 belts instead of Vasil Lomachenko.
Vasil Lomachenko, whose people are offering George Kambosos a rematch clause.
You heard that right. Even Vasil Lomachenko didn't have a rematch clause incorporated into the contract ahead of that Teofimo Lopez fight. The top-ranked people are determined to ensure that Vasil Lomachenko gets that shot. And here's the kicker. Even if Eddie Hearn can incentivize an offer that sees George fighting Devin instead of Loma fighting George, even if they can pull that off in the 13th hour, even if they can do that, that doesn't keep Vasil Lomachenko out of the picture. Let's say Devin goes down there. He beats George for those belts.
The WBO can always order Devin to fight Loma as his mandatory challenger.
It was always going to be this way. I ain't got a horse in the race. I'm okay with Devin getting the fight. I'm okay with Vasil Lomachenko getting the fight. There are people out there...
Well, they're a lot more specific with what they want.
Listen, there are people out there that don't want Vasil Lomachenko to get a crack at those 3 belts. They want that opportunity to go to Devin. On the other side of the coin, there are people out there, they don't care about Devin or his career or his email title, as they like to call it. They prefer that Vasil Lomachenko have the run of the place. As stated, there are people out there that are a lot more specific with what they want. But for me, it's inconsequential because for me, this was always going to be how it worked out. This was always going to be the case. It was either going to be Devin Haney that George fights next, or Vasyl Lomachenko, and I'm okay with either fight.
What you're expecting me to say is that George is ducking Devin to face a guy that I think is going to beat him?
I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make any fucking sense. For my money, the Vasyl Lomachenko fight is the more dangerous fight than the Devin Haney fight, because Devin Haney, skilled boxer that he might be, he hasn't proven to be a particularly concussive puncher. And short of a knockout in Australia, all kinds of wild possibilities.
But there's room for all kinds of funny stuff to happen on the cards.
Home field advantage is a real thing, folks, whether you like it or not, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. If you don't want to acknowledge it, what you really need to do is grow the fuck up.
Past weekend, do you think Danny would have lost to John if that fight would have happened in America?
Do you think Joseph Parker would have beat Andy Ruiz Jr. on the cards the way that he did if the fight would have happened here in the United States as opposed to over there in his neck of the woods in New Zealand? Would he have ever even become WBO champion? Home field advantage is a real thing. And in Australia, George has the upper hand. Devin not being a knockout puncher, it's conceivable that the fight could go to the cards. And based on the aesthetic of the fight, it's conceivable that George stands a better chance against him than Vasyl Lomachenko. Thus, if the Vasyl Lomachenko fight is the more dangerous fight, the fight he might not finish on his feet, it hardly makes any sense saying he's ducking Devin to fight Loma. Loma, who's more dangerous, more proven.
That's why I've been telling you, it's inconsequential to me. If Devin gets the shot, great.
If he doesn't, and Vasyl Lomachenko gets it, beats him to the punch, that works too. I'm okay with either fight because I like either fight. I wouldn't have minded seeing Devin Haney get that shot, that opportunity. And you know what? It's not too late. Maybe Eddie Hearn can further incentivize an offer for George to face Devin as opposed to facing Vasyl Lomachenko.
Top Rank's offering George a rematch clause, and you need to offer him one too.
And a little bit more bread off the top than what you've been offering him. If it's your aim to get Devin Haney in the ring with George, you need to do what you got to do now, because there ain't that many fights this size up there at 140 pounds. And Devin Haney stated, if they can't get George in the ring, then that's where they're going.
Those guys up there at 140 pounds ain't nothing to play with.
Sooner or later, Devin Haney, like many of these lightweights, is going to end up there at 140 pounds. But what you want is that before it comes to that, before he ascends to the super lightweight / junior welterweight division, he takes care of this unfinished business.
How many times have I said they need to hurry up and get a deal done?
Whilst hearing Bill Haney, Devin Haney's dad, say things like, we need to change the narrative that the fight has to happen in Australia, the kind of things that might stifle negotiations between the Haney people and the Kambosos people. Listen,
look,
George beat the man to be the man. And if he wants the fight in Australia, that's what you got to do. That's what you have to acquiesce to, because for right now and the foreseeable future, this is the biggest fight that Devin Haney could be a part of.
And I don't know what the fucking holdup is.
Well, I don't know why negotiations between Kambosos and Haney have hit a snag. I don't know what the exact problem is. What I do know, and what I've been telling you throughout, is that it's only a matter of time before Vasyl Lomachenko and Top Rank get involved. And now, they're involved. And finally, Samson Lewcowicz, via his own social media, posted this tweet that reads, Eddie Hearn, shit, I forgot to call Samson. At Matchroom and DAZN Boxing, Eddie, why didn't you call him? It seems that Samson Lewcowicz has taken a liking to trolling Eddie Hearn on the heels of news that Eddie would like to make a fight between Samson's boy, David Benavidez, and his guy, Demetrius Andre. Demetrius, who's supposed to be in the middle of negotiations for a Zach Parker fight in order to achieve an interim WBO spot at super middleweight.
Batten down the hatches. We're en route to another purse bid on the 25th of this month.
That's where those negotiations are. It appears they were unable to reach a deal by the deadline, thus it's going to a purse bid, and we'll talk about that in another video. Eddie said he wants to make a fight between Demetrius and David, and to that, Samson Lewcowicz stated that they would want in excess of what Jermall Charlo was offered for a Demetrius Andrade fight. Jermall was offered $7 million, and what Samson wants is closer to $10 million. We've talked about that here on the channel. Since then, since making those comments, he's taken a liking to tagging and trolling Eddie Hearn via social media, And these kinds of slimeball tactics, they don't fool anyone. I mean, I don't know, maybe they fool you, but they don't fool me. That kind of asking price, when you ask for that amount of money for that fight, you're not asking for that with hopes of getting it, because nobody's going to give you that for that fight. The market value of a fight is the market value of a fight. You ask the fighters and their managers.
Oh, I'll tell you, that guy's a fucking superstar. He's Julio Iglesias.
Fuck a Liberace is what he is. He just ain't putting up Liberace numbers. He ain't the kind of guy that makes $7 million a fight or in excess of $7 million a fight, whilst at the same time insisting that that's what you have to pay them to do that fight.
My fucking ass.
He's asking why Eddie Hearn hasn't called him yet. Well, maybe it's because you quite publicly priced out your fighter out of that fight. You didn't ask for in excess of $7 million with hopes of getting it. You asked for that amount of money because you knew you wouldn't get it and the fight wouldn't happen, so your fighter stays on that side of the street where you want him. If the asking price for David Benavidez is in excess of $7 million, something closer to 10,
Yeah.
couple that with whatever you have to pay Demetrius, and that puts us at, I don't know, maybe $10, $15 million in guaranteed prices. Problem is, this ain't a $10, $15 million fight.
You want your guy to get paid like he's something that he's not.
Oh, David Benavidez is getting paid $7 or $8 million to box guys like Kyron Davis and Ronald Ellis. Is he set to make $7 or $8 million boxing David Lemieux in his next fight? You know the answer.
For a perspective.
2-3 years ago, Jose Ramirez, reigning WBC super lightweight champion, was offered a career-high purse to come over to the Matchroom DAZN side of things and box Mighty Mo Hooker. He was offered $4 million, and he took the offer. I don't think David Benavidez has ever made $4 million for a single fight, one single fight. I don't think that's what he's making now, that he isn't a champion, that he doesn't have a world title. And he's asking for well in excess of what Jose Ramirez got.
Samson Lewcowicz is fucking him out of this fight and fucking him out of this money to give him what?
Offer him who? For what money? On what? Pay-per-view? You see how these pay-per-views are performing?
Which one of those guys over there are making the kind of money you're asking Eddie Hearn for?
Because we know it ain't your guy. We know it ain't your guy that's making that kind of money. He don't make that per fight.
What are you really up to, Samson?